Welcome to the Stay Paid Podcast, where we help agents and entrepreneurs master the latest business trends to unlock growth and create a life of freedom. Brought to you by Reminder Media.
Welcome to Stay Paid Podcast. My name is Joshua Stike.
And I'm Luke Acree.
And before we bring on our guest today, we'd love it if you take a minute to subscribe to Stay Paid on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you're not already subscribed, while you're there, drop us a review. We will read it here on the show. Our guest today is John Terry. John is a three-time martial arts Hall of Fame inductee and uses his black belt experience to help people become black belt
don't make him
leaders.
mad. Don't make him mad, ladies and
Don't
gentlemen.
mess with him. Through his leadership training and coaching, he inspires individuals to create high-performance teams and make a positive impact. And as a best-selling author, speaker, and consultant, John combines his martial arts experience with behavioral psychology to deliver practical and motivating guidance. John, welcome back to Stay Paid. Return guest
I'm excited
from
to be here,
2020.
guys. Looking forward to spending some time with y'all in the virtual room today.
Yeah,
Awesome.
man. I know you've written a new book. Want to get into that, but I want to dive right in. One of your mentors was John Maxwell. I remember you shared with us, right? Student of John Maxwell. He's a mentor to you. And I think one of the biggest struggles with leadership is accountability. People just don't hold themselves or their people accountable, probably at the level they should. Can you give us your thoughts on how great leaders practice accountability and implement that through their teams?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I actually talk about that in my book, Black Belt Leadership 101. That is one of the 10 essential character qualities of learning to be a black belt leader in life. And when we talk about accountability, for a leader's perspective, we need to think about it this way. If you are leading other people, you can't ask other people to do what you are not willing to do yourself. Leaders lead by example. And the very best leaders understand that they don't know it all. They don't have everything under control, and they need to be accountable to other people. They need to be accountable to themselves. They need to be accountable to the people that they're leading, and they need to have people that are ahead of them on the journey that they are accountable to, that are speaking into their life and giving them an opportunity to help them realize what they don't know. You know, as we go through life, we live our life experience knowing what we know, but we don't know what we don't know. And if we don't know what we don't know, we don't know what we don't know.
Well said.
Yeah, I walk around all day not knowing what I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
That is my life.
That's the pain point of life. It's
That
like
is
if I only knew my blind spots, then I would fix them.
Well,
But
let's
they're
talk,
blind.
because last time you were on, we talked a lot about accountability, but what we didn't get a chance to go into is kind of the communication piece of it, right? And how to effectively communicate as a leader. Now, this is something, you know, I think you will agree with this, that I struggle with from a communication standpoint, as from a leadership perspective. Talk about how can leaders communicate effectively to their teams, to the people that they're trying to influence, and kind of communicate what they're trying to accomplish with their teams.
Well, communication is another essential tool that I talk about in Black Belt Leadership 101. And it's an important element of being a leader, because if those that you are following do not understand where you're going and they don't have a clear, concise view of what a win looks like, they don't know how to help you get from where you are to where you want to be. So communication is essential. And I love one of the phrases Dr. John uses, and matter of fact, he wrote a book on it. Everybody communicates, few connect. We use words often, but we don't think into the words that we use. And communication only takes place when the words that I'm speaking to someone are understood with the same meaning and intent as I intend them to be. And how many times throughout the day do we miscommunicate because either we say something the wrong way, we don't speak in an articulate language. One of the things I've learned from human behavior is the fact that oftentimes we speak a different language than the people that we're interacting with, because we all see the world through a different lens. So one of the areas I really focus on in communication is to begin to understand the human element of how people communicate and how they want to be given information so they can process that effectively. That's an important part of making sure that the message I want delivered, the message you want delivered, the message any leader wants delivered is understood. And it's saying it in a way that the people that are receiving that message understand the intent and the meaning behind it.
How do you figure that out? How do you find out? Like, how do I find out how Luke wants to be communicated to, right?
So I'll give you an example. One of the companies I lead is a company called Real Life Management. And we have an assessment tool that we use. It's a 3-minute assessment tool that gives you an opportunity to understand how people want to be communicated with. You can do the same thing with a DISC profile. I'm also DISC certified. Any one of these personality behavior assessment exams that you can take an individual to will show you whether or not they want to be communicated with detail, with expression, with a story, with care and concern. And understanding these different nuances help us speak that other person's language in a way that we're taking what we understand and maybe speaking it a little bit differently. And I'll give you one example. My wife is very structured and detailed. So when I want to speak with her, I have to give her the detail of the day, and I have to give her step-by-step instructions. But at the same time, she's very loving, very compassionate, very caring. So in my communication with her, I have to give her more of the reason why I'm doing a certain thing and how that's helping the people that I'm working with, because that's important to her. Now, for me, I'm different. I'm expressive. I'm a very visionary thinker. So I want to know what's the quick action plan, what's the big idea that we want to accomplish, and what's the fastest way to get that done. Two different styles of communication, but understanding those nuances, I can take what I know and I can transform how I speak that to speak her language so that at the end of the conversation, she and I have not just communicated, we've connected.
What about when you're speaking to a group? So like you're leading a team, you're trying, you have group discussions, you have, kind of these meetings. Like whenever you're trying to communicate that to a group, you can't speak to everyone's communication style. What tips would you have kind of to effectively communicate in that kind of a setting?
Yeah, well, you can and you can't, Josh, look at this particular example, because when I go into an organization, and I do this quite often, understand that there are 4 primary speaking styles of the people that are in the room. So as I'm speaking to a group of people, I want to make sure in that group communication, I have elements of detail and structure. I have elements of vision and big picture thinking. I have elements of fun and entertainment and storytelling. And I have elements of compassion and caring about people and causes. And when I can mix and blend those elements together, I now have the opportunity to speak to the entire group and connect with them at some point during that conversation.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I also think, there's a golden nugget in there that you mentioned when you were talking about communication, which is basically the meaning of the words and what you're intending versus what the person's actually receiving and understanding. And I think too often in my experience, we speak in generality or we speak in themes. So a perfect example would be, I want you to be more charismatic. Well, charismatic to me might mean something different than it means to you. And it might mean something different than somebody else, even though we all kind of have a generality of what charisma looks like. But being very specific and what I'm looking for you to do can help and help bring clarity. And so I always ask myself before I'm giving feedback to somebody is, what are the specifics that I am communicating to this person? So if you took the charisma example or motivation or something like that, you could maybe say, hey, what I'm looking for from you is more active listening and more inflection in your tone. Like you're very monotone when you're speaking. And so it tunes people out or people tune out versus having more volume and inflection. So next time you're speaking, can you try to add a little bit more dynamic and inflection? Can you try to add a little bit more active listening? Active listening is smiling at people, looking people in the eye, nodding along when they say something so they know you understand. So you're giving them very specific, instead of just saying, hey, be more charismatic and engaging, which they could interpret a million different ways. Now they know, okay, I need more tone in my voice and I need to actually smile and look people in the eye. And it's more specific in their ability to actually apply the feedback, which I have found in my years of leading people now, that has been very helpful versus speaking generality. You still give them, hey, my ultimate goal is to help you be more charismatic, help you speak a little bit better. But here's what it looks like that we need you to do, so there's no confusion, that you can practice and you can work on. And that has helped a ton.
No, I absolutely agree, Luke. And I mean, think about one of the industries you serve, the financial services industry. They have their own unique language that they speak with verbiage to them that is familiar. But when they go to speak to their audience, which is the consumer doesn't speak that language. And as a result of that, they begin to talk about these terms that they use, that they understand, that the common man, common woman doesn't.
Great
And we
point.
have that in every industry. We have that in our lives, even in the family dynamic. Every family has their own unique words they speak, their own phrases and their own methodology and the way they communicate together that may be different and unique. I mean, go to Chicago if you're from the South and try to talk to somebody in Chicago when they talk 100 miles an hour and you're kind of having to lean in and say, what did they say? We're here in the South, we talk a little slower. We've got a little bit of a drawl. And it's those differences and nuances in learning how to connect and communicate that allow us to get the point across that we want to get across so that we're all working together for the common good that we're trying to achieve.
I would add too that I'm curious what you think about this. I find that people who, like, my biggest struggle in leadership always has been clarity of my expectations and clarity of where I am not happy versus I'm happy, because I'm an influencer by the DISC assessment. So I naturally make people feel motivated and uplifted. And so it's very easy. I can deliver a bad message and the person walks out of there feeling like, all right, he believes in me. We're going to do this, versus going, no. If you don't get this done next time, I have to part ways with you, type idea. And so I have found that what people really truly crave, whether you're from the Northeast, you're from the South, is they crave real. They crave raw. They crave the truth. And I think too often when you try to communicate effectively, you're trying to almost sell the person on the other end instead of just speaking your true thoughts. And what people don't understand is, I don't know if it's biology or psychology or physiology, whatever it is, you just can sense. It's like dogs can sense when something's wrong. Like, as a human, you can just sense when someone is not giving you what they're really thinking. They're kind of dancing around the point.
Yeah, I mean, we see that in politics all day long. You've got politicians on both sides of the political spectrum that, they have these things they want to say without saying anything. But I think it's an even greater point that we have to go back to, and it's a quote from Teddy Roosevelt, one of our presidents. He said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think an essential part of communication is making that touch point that we actually connect on an emotional level, because we're emotional creatures. And as we go through processing thoughts and ideas, our very first inclination is to act on our emotions. And if we don't physically connect in an emotional level with the person we're communicating with, and they feel like they matter to us, then they're not going to be as attentive. They're not going to listen. They're not going to lean in, and they're not going to really want to give you their full attention. That's an important part of communication, is having that emotional connection on the front end that says, hey, Luke, hey, Josh, I want you guys to know I care about you. You matter to me. And because of that, I want to talk about a few things here that I think we can do better. And with that approach, where you're making that emotional connection in communication, that gives us an opportunity to really get that other person to lean in and say, they care about me. They value me as an individual. So I'm willing to lean in and see what I can do to reciprocate in like manner and have an opportunity that collectively we can learn.
Well, it goes back to your first point of accountability. True accountability is walking with your people in the work. And helping them and showing them. And like, I almost feel like if you haven't displayed emotional connection or connected with your person that you're leading before you have to have the difficult conversation or the clarity of communication, then you've already lost, because your actions,
loyalty aspect.
Yeah, correct. Your actions have already displayed something different than what you're saying. And so what that whole authenticity and realness and truth is already broken, because they're like, well, you've never talked to me before, and now you're just parachuting in and basically telling me I'm doing a bad job. Which happens all the time in our company. I'm guilty of it, because you get busy, you undervalue just touching base with people and checking in. And that's why it all comes back to probably discipline of communicating clearly, consistently, over long periods of time is probably what it comes back to.
Yeah, so really it comes down at the end of the day to trust. When we trust someone, and trust is earned over time, and it's something that someone has to give you. You can't demand it of someone. It's something they have to be willing to voluntarily give you. But when they trust you, they are much more open to hearing from you, coming alongside to support you, and following you as a leader and helping you get from where you are to where you want to be. That trust is so invaluable in any relationship, whether personal or professional.
So tell us about the new book.
So, new book just came out April of this year. It's called The Black Belt Secrets of Success. I've been keynoting across the country now. I've got 2 more events next week that I'm doing, 2 events this week. So
Awesome.
It's been an incredible opportunity. What I did in this book, Luke, is book number 8. This book looks at, and I've done a history lesson of looking at successful people throughout history and digging into what made these people successful and what are the lessons that we can learn from them that we can apply to our lives. And what I found as I put this book together is there are 11 success principles that if we implement them in our lives, it gives us an opportunity to be more successful both in our personal lives and in our professional lives. And it helps us identify the roadblocks that often we put in our own way that prohibit us from getting to that destination that we believe we want for ourselves. And it allows us to move those out of the way so we can keep moving forward.
So give us your trait out of the 11 that you feel you're working on the most that you need to get better in.
To me, it's the first one. And the first essential success quality is really paramount. And if you don't do number 1, you can't do the other 10. And that is this. Successful people do daily what unsuccessful people do sometimes or not at all. And I've learned in my life that if I'm not every day focusing on becoming a better version of who I was the day before, I've stopped growing. And to go back to a phrase that Ray Kroc shared years ago, he says, as long as you're green, you're growing. But once you're ripe, you start to rot. I don't want to be a rotten leader. And the only way I can not be a rotten leader is to make sure that every day I'm doing what successful people do, learning, growing, maturing, and becoming a better version today of who I was yesterday, understanding that tomorrow I've got to do that again. That is the core success principle that I build on in the book, Black Belt Secrets of Success.
Yeah, it's so true. It is that discipline of, like, I always think of success as doing is what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level for long periods of time. Because usually it's like, when's the best day to go to the gym? The day you don't want to, right? And doing it consistently over long periods of time with the right attitude, right? That's why it's like doing it at the highest level.
That's right.
Because you have to have the right attitude in it. So where can people find the book? How do they go and get it?
Well, all of my books are available on my website, beablackbeltleader.com. Anybody can be a leader, but it takes somebody to be a black belt leader. So beablackbeltleader.com. You'll find all of my books there, as well as a number of other tools, resources, access to my podcast, my newsletter, all my social media links are there as well. So it is a one-stop shop for everything black belt leadership related.
I love that. If you were going to go back and tell your younger self any advice, what advice would you give them with all the 8 books now and years of experience and working with people? What advice would you give that college student?
To me, Luke, it would be believe in yourself. Because all too often we go through life wondering, who am I? What can I do? What can I become? But it starts with believing in yourself. It starts with believing in your ability to say, do, and become more than you already are. To be able to understand that there's something inside of you, what I call that black belt leader within, waiting to be discovered, developed, and deployed. Believe it's there. Believe that you were endowed by your creator with these gifts and abilities to go make a difference. So believe in yourself and have the opportunity to step out there and trust that as you take that next step, that black belt leader within you is going to begin to be discovered. And then we develop. And then once we develop it, we deploy it to make a difference in the world.
Yeah, so good.
Love it. John, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast, sharing with us your thoughts there in leadership, as well as updating us on your new book, beablackbeltleader.com. John mentions where you can get the book and connect with him. And we'll have links to that in our show notes as well. You can get that over at staypaidpodcast.com. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you can support the show by heading over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leaving us a review. And the best way to support the show is simply share this episode with somebody that you know. If you want to get hold of me or Luke, you can email us at podcast@remindermedia.com. And of course, you can follow us on social media. We are at Stay Paid Podcast. For this episode of Stay Paid, I'm Joshua Stike.
Guys, I'm Luke Acree. John, thank you so much. You never disappoint. Very, very powerful wealth of knowledge. Definitely go get his book, ladies and gentlemen. It will be well worth it. My action item for all of you is we all want to be better leaders. And I think the takeaway is your words mean something. And you have to think about the words that you're using. And I think the big mistake that you make, whether you're a financial advisor, real estate agent, insurance agent, is you're using language right now in your presentations to your consumers that but they have no idea what you mean because you have all the knowledge, the context, the industry, but they don't have any of that. And so I would challenge you to look at your listing presentation, your presentation when it comes to presenting insurance or finances, and ask yourself, hey, does my consumer know all this stuff that I'm saying? And am I actually communicating in a way that they can receive this versus a way that I receive it? Remember, the difference between top producers and mediocre producers in every business is top producers take action. Take action on that today.